Craig Conroy gave an update on contract extension talks with Dan Vladar, but what happens if they don't come to an agreement?
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jessica Belmosto, and thank you so much for joining me. Today, we are going to talk about the latest updates provided by Craig Conroy himself to the Calgary Herald in terms of where things stand with backup goaltender Dan Vladar. And make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your Calgary Flames every day. And let's jump right into this. So Dan Vladar is 27 years old. He is a backup goaltender. And he could potentially, he's expected to hit the market, it sounds like, on July 1st. So, the Flames are in a little bit of a dilemma, pickle, maybe. But they're still trying to work things out with Vladar and his camp. There was a lot of uncertainty going into this past season with their goalie plans. They traded Jacob Markstrom. Dustin Wolf was finally going to get a shot at staying on the NHL roster consistently. And, Dan Vladar was going to have to fight for some action. But it obviously, him and Wolf went one after the other. And then for a while there, after that, it switched to win and you're in. And I mean, I can't judge how Huska made the goaltending decisions because ultimately he's with the players all day. He knows what they're capable of, so on and so forth. But I think that was a very fair decision. And especially in the start, because you don't know how things are going to go. But as the season went on, he finished the season with an .895 save percentage and a 2.86 goals against average with 29 games played. Even after all of that, Vladar sounded like he really wanted to be back in Calgary at the end of the season meetings. He could not stress enough how much he loves the team and, what's going on within the organization. And he wants to play. He wants to be a Flame. And he has every intention of coming back as a Flame. But Craig Conroy, it's been 2 months. Yesterday marked 2 months since the Flame season finished. So we are 8 weeks removed from the season. Give or take, let's say a week and a half, 2 weeks. If, players and agents need time to decompress or, get their ducks in a row, or just not talk hockey. And, that leaves like 6 weeks of negotiations. And for a backup goaltender, I think that's more than enough time. I think obviously every player is different. Every scenario is different. But with Dan Vladar, he is your backup goaltender. Dustin Wolf is your starter. The goalie market this upcoming July 1st, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, is mainly, it's slim pickings. Let's be honest. But what is your contingency plan? What's your backup goalie plan? Because sure, if both sides are plugging away at making this deal happen, that's good. That means there's still some hope, obviously. But I'm very curious as to what the holdup is from either side. I wonder if it's term. With the cap increasing, I am less likely to believe it's cap salary related. I mean, I don't see him making $5 million a year, but we're going to talk about a potential contract a little bit later. But regardless, what is the Flames contingency plan? Okay, let's say Vladar hits the market. Who are you going to sign? Are you just expecting to call up Logan Cooley, Devin Cooley? Did it again. It's Devin Cooley. And are you going to expect like Owen Say to come in? What is the plan? Because the Flames goalie depth chart is pretty solid, but I don't know if you have players that are quite ready to take that jump to the AHL outside of Say. So I'm just kind of perplexed as to why they wouldn't go out and sign a backup goaltender if Vladar does not sign. Because, I mean, we're going to talk more about the available goaltenders coming up a little bit later in the show, but to me, this is a good backup goaltending class, I guess you could say. And I think that kind of benefits the Flames, because if they don't really have an answer by July 1st and say they're still in talks, you know, they can just go out and sign someone. They don't have to wait around. Right now, obviously, it's very different. But, I mean, at the end of the day, you need to grab the goalie that works best for you. And we know that the Flames really don't like change. They don't have to make change unless it's absolutely necessary. And sometimes it's just something else that forces their hand. But coming up next, we're going to talk about what a potential contract looks like, because, again, with the cap going up, his age, and his inconsistency, what are we mixing together? Coming up next here on Locked On Flames. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. I am a big fan of the salt and vinegar no shell variety. I need to go get another bag. I ran out earlier this week, and I need to stock my own cupboards here at home and have a pack on my desk, because they're such a quick, easy grab and go snack that I can fuel myself with throughout the day. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to today's episode of Locked On Flames. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We're here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your team every day. So what does this upcoming contract look like? What does it look like for a 27-year-old backup goaltender who hasn't really shown anything but inconsistency? This season, there is no uncertainty of who your starter is or what his role with the team is. Justin Wolf is your starter. There's no question about that. And to me, I like Vladar. I don't have an issue with him. My the biggest red flag or issue I have is just the inconsistency. But he's not a starting goaltender. I don't expect him to go out there and have, Connor Hellebuck nights, but I would like to see more consistency from him. And I think that's a reasonable ask. He's been with the team, 3-4 years at this point? The Flames goalie coach works miracles. We have seen this. He's able to refine skills and really bring the goaltending up to that next level. So I wonder what, maybe it is simply just a skill issue. I don't know. But I like Vladar. I think that there is still more that he can give. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. He's 27 years old. So, and he's your backup. You're not signing him to a 5, 6, 7-year deal. Makes no sense. Why would you do that? But I know that goaltenders sometimes are like late bloomers. So maybe, from 25 to 28, they really step into their own as a goalie and kind of go through this second wave of development. So maybe that's what we're going to see here at this later half of the curve, I guess. I guess my point is that we've seen what we're going to get. We know what we're going to get with him, with the team that's in front of him. Do you want to move on from that? Is that something that you want to lose? Or is there someone out there that is another option that can do the same thing and maybe for less money? I could see Wolf getting another 50 starts next season. I think that is reasonable, depending, any injuries or coaching decisions. Huska very well could implement that same rotation that he did last year, whether it's, every other game to start the season, to get both of them, even if it's not Vladar, every other game for them, or, at some point, maybe say November, it's okay, you win and you're in sort of deal until like we really think that you need a break, or until we want to throw the other guy in. And I would think that that's fine. I think we know that Dustin Wolf is the starter, but I think getting both of your goalies in there to start the season, to have fresh legs, fresh arms, fresh eyes, kind of get their footing for this season, I think that that's fair. But at the end of the day, Dustin Wolf is your starter. So at one point or another, the season is gonna the rotation's gonna stop. But what does a contract look like? Because, like I mentioned, Dan Vladar is 27 years old. He finished this past season with a 2.86 goals against average and an 895 save percentage. Just below 900, but really would like to see that first number start with a 9, even if it's a 901. I think the 895 for a backup goaltender is, it's fine. I would say it's average, if not maybe slightly above. But I'm concerned with the level of inconsistency that he has had. I'm concerned with that hip injury he had it was last season when he needed season-ending hip surgery after the trade deadline. Do these things pop up again? Likely. He's a goaltender. He's a hockey player. Okay, those are all things you need to take into consideration, right? And that's fine. I guess right now, he's making $2.2 million, which I think that's fair. It's a good chunk of change for a backup goalie. And especially as the cap increases, we're going to see numbers that feel astronomical, but really aren't. But my point is, you're going to see him get a raise. So is that like a 2.5, 2.5, 2.8 to, I don't know, 3.8? I don't know. But I think what we're looking at is a probably 3.2 to $3.5 million, depending on if we're doing 2 or 3 years or if we're doing 1 or 2 years. The term, I think, is going to be a big factor in that, obviously. I don't think they need to extend him beyond 2 years. I think, like I mentioned before, the Flames have pretty good goaltenders coming up the pipeline, and Vladar has been a good backup goalie. He proved himself with Markstrom, and he's proving himself behind Wolf now. And, let's say he does leave. Okay, well, you sign so-and-so goaltender for 2 years, and then, they retire. I don't know, because most of these goalies are really old. And then, okay, your next in line isn't ready to make the jump to the NHL yet. Okay, you do the same thing. You just go out and grab a backup goaltender until this guy is ready. And that's the unfortunate part. Your goalies aren't just going to start popping like forwards do sometimes. Goaltending is weird. Goaltending is a position that you cannot project correctly year after year after year, because I'll use Jacob Markstrom as an example because we saw the patterns ourselves, right? Good one year, bad another, good and then bad, good and then bad. So you have to take that into consideration as well, especially when you're talking about Dustin Wolf. There's a very big chance that he faces a regression this year. He very well could hit the sophomore slump square on in the face. It's likely. The sophomore slump didn't just get its name because it's illiterate, an alliteration. It is truly something that happens to athletes across the board. So, is this something that the Flames are going to, kind of fall back on and say, okay, Vladar, we know that you can hold your weight. We know that you can start a chunk of games. So, here we go. Rather than bringing in someone new who doesn't know this group, who doesn't know the team in front of him, and you have a little less confidence in him. But coming up next, we are going to talk about some goaltenders that may be an option for the Flames should Dan Vladar hit the market. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're following me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Jess Belmosto. When I was looking at this UFA goaltending class, all I could think about was, what a great year to need a backup goaltender. I like when teams get their backup goaltenders during free agency, so that way you don't have to give up assets for them. I think that's probably why. I mean, teams weren't interested in Dan Vladar, not this past season, but the season before, ahead of the deadline. And I don't necessarily think teams want to give up assets for a backup goaltender, especially one on an expiring contract, unless they are an incredible tandem, both are, pulling his weight, 40, 35 to 40 starts the season himself, and, crazy save percentage and things like that. So you have a 1A and a 1B, but unfortunately Dan Vladar isn't a 1B. He's 2. And for the Flames, I think you need a veteran. You need a veteran goaltender. And this list is full of them. Frederik Andersen of the Carolina Hurricanes is likely hitting the market. I think that at 35 years old, he had came back from some serious health issues, and I think that's an incredible feat in its own. And then to come back and play playoff hockey as well. He has played in front of, or I guess behind, many different teams, quality of rosters, questionable defense. I will say he played in behind that Maple Leafs defense, that was bad. It was bad. Like pre-2019. Even then, still pretty bad. So he knows what it takes. And I think that a 1-year deal for him would make sense. I don't know what his plans are. I haven't seen anything about him retiring. So I think it's premature to say, oh, well, he's going to retire because he's 35 years old and has battled health issues. We know that these players will literally play until their limbs all fall off. So would it make sense? Yeah. Especially if you want Wolf getting a bulk of the starts. I think that's fair. I don't think you sign him for more than a year. I think that's really as far as you can go, which is fine. Because then you'll just deal with it next summer too. David Riddick. What a familiar name. What a familiar face. He is back on the market after serving as a backup goaltender in LA. And could he be on his way back to Calgary? We know that obviously him and the team have history. He was a fine backup goaltender. I think if anything, he's gotten better. And that's just what happens over time outside of an organization. You learn more skills. You're around different coaches and different players and teammates and what have you. But I think Riddick is not a choice, or maybe not on the list. I think that it's not something maybe one party would be interested in, just based on how things ended. So Jake Allen is he backed up Jacob Markstrom this year in New Jersey, and to me, this feels like a safe choice. I think that he is going to be the goaltender that most teams target. And, he had a .906 save percentage, a 2.66 goals against average. The Devils defense, they were without Dougie Hamilton. So, they were without some key pieces this year, and he still did pretty well. Obviously, backing up Jacob Markstrom is, like, most days, you're not even, like, clocking in. You're just chilling on the bench or your stool. I think that he is young enough. He is not going to be overly expensive, and he's not expecting to start. So I guess I would say this is the player to go after if Dan Vladar doesn't resign. I think that, he had a heck of a time in St. Louis and then in Montreal and, New Jersey, and maybe he heads back up to Canada. I think that all of these goaltenders should be around $3 million or less. I don't think that anything more would be reasonable. I think maybe, honestly, for Anderson, you might be able to do like the veteran minimum and then do something like the incentivized bonuses, like heavy on the incentivized bonuses, which I think is a great idea, especially for a guy who has dealt with health issues and, is 35 years old. So anything is possible. I hope that the Flames come to an agreement with Vladar, but it feels like at this point, it's not happening. So maybe they hit the market on July 1st, and that'll be here before you know it, which is absolutely bananas to me. But regardless, I think everyone should kind of have faith incorrect Conroy in figuring this out. I'm not as concerned with signing a backup goalie as I am a 32-year-old forward. Another 32-year-old forward to this group. So deep breaths. We will get through the summer, and Flames will be back at the Saddle Dome before we know it. But that'll do it for me here on today's episode of Locked On Flames. Thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you have a fantastic day. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We're here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your Calgary Flames every day, and I'll see you tomorrow to wrap up the week.